Welcome to the Summit Academy. We are going to discuss the disaster management current affairs and the topic is about the stampede. We are going to discuss the what definition of the stampede, the factors responsible for the stampede and how to address this disaster. And apart from these 3 points of discussion, we are also going to discuss whether the stampede is often a sudden disaster or else it is of a slow onset disaster. Let's dive into the topic of the stampede. Large gatherings are part of an Indian culture. Faith, festivals, fandom, political rallies, melas bring the millions of people together. Any mismanagement of such a crowd lead to the disaster that is stampede. The first point of discussion is about the definition of the stampede. The stampede includes an impulsive mass movement of the crowd, usually triggered by the panic, fear, or excitement. There are two types of the stampede, unidirectional stampede and turbulent stampede. In unidirectional stampede, the crowd movement will be in the same direction, whereas in the turbulent stampede, the crowd movement will be in the multiple directions. In the unidirectional stampede, as we have discussed, the crowd movement will be in the same direction when they encounter the positive force or the negative force that triggers the stampede. Now we will discuss how the positive force triggers the stampede and how the negative force that triggers the stampede. First thing is about the positive force. Let's imagine the crowd is moving in the same direction. In such a crowd, the force will be high. There will be the multiplication of the force. In such a moving crowd, if there are sudden stoppage, the sudden stoppage of the crowd lead to the piling up of people one among the others that triggers the stampede. This is how the positive force is responsible for the stampedes. Now we will discuss how the negative force is responsible for the stampedes. Let's imagine the crowd is moving in the same direction and they are moving on a bridge. If there is a collapse of the bridge, that lead to the piling up of people one among the others. Or else let's imagine another example where the crowd is moving in the same direction and there is a barriers or the railings in that crowd. When there is a broken barriers or when there is a collapse of the barriers, collapse of the railings, that lead to piling up of people one among the others. So it implies that the structural collapses triggers the negative force and further the negative force which further results into the stampede. This is the way how the positive force and negative force triggers the stampede. Now we will discuss the turbulent stampede. In turbulent stampede, unlike the unidirectional stampede, in the turbulent stampede, the crowd movement will be in the multiple directions. Out of panic, out of fear, and out of an excitement, that triggered by the rumors or the misinformation or the confusion regarding the entry and exit points, the crowd movement will be in the multiple directions, and that multiple directions will triggers the stampede. These are the two kinds of the stampedes. Usually, the stampede takes place when the accommodative capacity of the place is less than that of volume of people. It implies that the area is small but the crowd is more. In such an areas, the stampede usually triggers. And next point of the discussion will be the whether the stampede is often a sudden disaster or else the slow onset disaster. Very often, the people perceive that the stampede is often sudden disaster. It is an act of the god. But it is not of an act of the god. It is an purely man-made disaster. It is not of a sudden disaster. It is an slow onset disaster. There are some structural factors which pile up the momentum to trigger this incident or to trigger this disaster. Now we will discuss the factors that are responsible for the stampede. The third point of the discussion will be the factors responsible for the stampede. It includes the poor urban infrastructure, poor management of the crowd, socio-culture factors, human behavioral factors. So these are the factors that are responsible for the stampede. Now we will discuss one by one. The first thing is about the poor urban infrastructure. In the poor urban infrastructure, the first point will be the structural collapses. We have discussed in the unidirectional stampede that too when the crowd is moving in the same direction, when they encounter the negative force, that is negative force is nothing but a structural collapses. The structural collapses triggers the negative forces and the negative force further results into the stampede. The examples like Ratangad temple incident, Naina Devi temple incident and the Elphinstone bridge collapse. The common feature among the 3 incidents is that there is a structural collapses and the structural collapses triggers the negative force and the negative force results into the stampede. And other points of discussion in the poor urban infrastructure includes we have a narrow streets, we have a steep streets and the urban planning or the town planning is not designed in such a way to accommodate such a large crowds. And apart from this thing, this lack of emergency exit routes. If there is a proper exit routes, even if there is a crowd due to panic or fear, if there is a mass movement, they can move out of that entry, they can move out of that exit point, so we can prevent the stampede. But the lack of emergency exit routes aggravate the situation of the stampede. In the Hathras incident, around 120 casualties have been registered. The prime responsible is this lack of exit routes. If there is a proper exit routes, emergency exit route, the crowd can move out of that exit routes, and we can and the stampede would not have taken place. But lack of exit routes aggravate the situation of the stampede. So this one factor, that is poor urban infrastructure, is responsible for the stampede. Now we will discuss the second factor that is responsible for the stampede, that is the poor management of the crowd. Generally, the event organizers will estimate the crowd. We'll estimate the quantity of the crowd, that is the volume of the crowd, and pass over that information to the police department, and the police department will arrange the number of police personnel to handle such a crowd. But the problem arises when the event organizers fail to estimate the crowd. Examples includes the RCB management. Examples includes this Chinnaswamy Stadium incident and also the Hathras incident. If you take this Chinnaswamy Stadium incident, the RCB management have failed to estimate the crowd. They said that we have not estimated such a crowd. Next thing, in the Hathras incident, it is of a religious event, and in that religious event, the event organizers have said that initially around 20,000 to 30,000 devotees will attend this religious event. But on that day, around 1 lakh religious devotees have been attended that event. So finally the event organizer said that we have not estimated that crowd. So the problem arises when the event organizers fail to estimate the crowd. So there is lack of transparency in the information, lack of transparency regarding the information of the quantity of the crowd or the volume of crowd between the event organizers and the police department. And other factors includes there is a expertise shortage in the NDRF and the police department to handle such a crowd. There is a lack of capacity building among the NDRF personnel and the police department personnel to handle such a crowd. And other factors includes there is a lack of coordination among the officials, misinformation prevailing among the officials, or response for the stampede. The stampede incident which took place in the Tirupati and the stampede incident which took place in the Delhi metro station, these two incidents cast a light where the event organizers, there is a lack of coordination among the officials or the authorities, and the misinformation prevailing among the authorities are the prime factors to trigger the stampede in the Tirupati and in the Delhi metro stations. We have a number of acts for the crowd management, like we have a Police Acts, Epidemic Act, Cinematography Act, and the BNS section 106 to address the negligence. But though we have a number of acts for the crowd management, failure to implement such an acts is responsible for the stampede. And the NDMA Act, that is National Disaster Management Act guidelines, National Disaster Management Act have prescribed the guidelines. And the Section 24 and Section 25 of the Disaster Management Act 2005 also prescribe the guidelines for the proper crowd management and to prevent this stampede. But the problem arises when there is a failure to comply with the guidelines issued by the NDMA Act. And if you look at the stampede incidents, it is of a recurrent event. It is of a recurrent incident. Within this span of these 2 years, there are a number of incidents that taken place. The Mahakumbh Mela incident, where the stampede took place. Delhi metro station, the stampede took place. Hathras incident, where the stampede took place. Tirupati, the stampede took place. And Chinnaswamy Stadium, the stampede took place. And the recent 2 examples of Jagannath Rath Yatra, where the stampede took place, and in Haryana, Mansa Devi temple incident, the stampede took place. The stampede is taking place, it is a recurrent incident, but the officials failed to learn the lesson out of it and to prevent this disaster. These are some of the governance issues response for the stampede. The next thing is socio-culture factors. How the socio-culture factors is responsible for the stampede. The Indian people are high tolerant towards the crowding areas. Unlike the foreigners who feel suffocation and uncomfortable in the crowds, the Indian people are well accustomed to that crowding areas, and the Indian people, it is a vulnerable factor to these incidents like a stampede. And lack of civic sense, lack of public culture, lack of scientific temper, the superstitions prevailing in the crowd are responsible for the stampede. In the Hathras incident, the lack of scientific temper and the superstition that are prevailing among the crowd is responsible for the stampede. So these are the few socio-culture factors responsible for the stampede. Around 70% of the stampede takes place in the religious events because of the lack of civic sense in the crowd, lack of public culture in the crowd, lack of scientific temper in the crowd, and lack of superstition. The widespread prevalence of the superstitions among the crowd. So this is one socio-culture factor. These are the socio-culture factors responsible for the stampede. Next, we will discuss the human behavior factor that are responsible for the stampede. That is fear, panic, or excitement lead to carelessness, impatient behavior, aggressive behavior as response for the stampede. These factors aggravate the situation of the stampedes. And what is the crowd psychology that is observed in the stampede? Out of fear, panic, excitement, there will be the mass hysteria is triggered in such a crowd, and there will be the wild rush at the entry and exit points, and the individual loses its rationality. He start copying the crowd movement. Out of fear, panic, and excitement, the individual dilutes their rationality, and there will be the de-individualization, and he start mimicking or copying the crowd movement, and the individual instinct of survival comes first in such an event, and the collective behavior will be diluted. So these are the crowd psychology that was observed in the stampede. What are the effects of the stampede? The effects of the stampede includes the that is physical injury, fracture of bones, neck, hypoxia, crushing effect of the chest, lead to failure of the diaphragm to expand or contract so that the person cannot inhale or exhale the air, cardiac arrest, and the victims of the stampede develops the PTSD, that is post-traumatic stress disorder, and also they develops the claustrophobia, that is fear of the crowd. Next time, the victims of the crowd won't participate in any events. It is a revenue loss to the event organizers, and the event organizers and the government have to pay the compensation to the victims. It is also the revenue loss. The people aftermath of this incidents, aftermath of this disaster, the people lose their faith over the government, they lose their trust over the government and the authorities. So these are the effects of the stampede. Black hole effect associated with the stampede. We know that the black hole is, we know about the black hole, that it have a strong gravitational force. If any object comes near to it, it have such a gravitational force to attract it. Now how can we connect the black hole which is taking place in the space and the black hole effect that is taking place in the stampede? Just imagine there is a tightly packed crowd and there is a movement in such a crowd. In such a tightly packed crowd, the density will be high, there won't be any space. By mistake, if there is a collapse of an individual, that collapse of individual leads to vacuum creation or the space creation in such a tightly packed crowd. That vacuum or the space have an ability to draw the people towards it, similar to that of the black hole. So this is how this is about the black hole effect. The black hole effect is nothing but a vacuum or the space that are created due to the collapse of the individual, and that space have an ability to draw more people, some more people to to draw the people towards it. This is about the black hole effect associated with the stampede. And the fourth point of discussion will be how to address the stampede. We have discussed that the factors responsible for the stampede. Now how to address the stampede? How to prevent the stampede? We can prevent through the stampede by proper understanding of the factors responsible for the stampede. We discussed about that the structural collapses triggers the negative force, and the negative force further results into the stampede. Now how to prevent the stampede? How to address these structural collapses? It can be addressed to the timely revamping and renovating the infrastructure, timely inspection of the cables, bridges. We can deploy the drones. The maintenance cost will be low. So the timely management or timely inspection of these bridges or the infrastructure and timely revamping and renovating this infrastructure can prevent this stampede. And we also discussed one factor has been discussed. One factor have been discussed. And next thing is we also discussed that the lack of emergency exit routes aggravate the situation of stampede. How to address it? It can be addressed to the proper establishment of the signage boards, visual boards displaying the entry and exit point, so that the crowd, even if there is a panic or the fear among the crowd, they can move out of the entry, they can move out of the exit points, and we can prevent the stampede. And we also discussed that the failure to comply with the NDMA Act guidelines is responsible for the stampede. How to address it? It can be addressed to the proper implementation of the NDMA Act guidelines. If you observe the NDMA Act guidelines, it have prescribed that the pre-event planning. Pre-event planning includes the identifying the potential hazards, identifying the bottlenecks, that is the narrow exits, and the Indian Act guidelines have prescribed them a collaborative stakeholder approach and the comprehensive crowd management plan. The comprehensive crowd management plan includes the pre-event assessment. I mean, before the event takes place, we have to assess the type of the event, whether it is of an religious event, whether it is of an celebration event, whether it is of an political event. And we also assess the quantity of the crowd, I mean the volume of the crowd, their age should also taken into consideration. Because in the celebrations event, the youth participation will be more, and the youth participation will be high, and the josh will be high. More proactive steps have to be taken. In the RCB event itself, initially the police department are reluctant to give the permission for the celebrations, because they felt that till the after 2 to 3 days the josh will be diluted, so we can give the permission. But I don't know. But later, what happened? But later, they have given a permission to that event. And next, we have to assess the crowd type of. We have to assess the venue of that event also, and there should be the strong stakeholder collaboration. The stakeholders here includes the police department, event organizers, audience, and the uh, emergency health department, fire department, NDRF, volunteers, press, and the neighbors surrounding in that event. So there should be the proper stakeholder collaboration before the event takes place. And the crowd management includes the capacity planning and the risk assessment, capacity building. So these are the few guidelines issued by the NDMA. And we also discussed that the event organizers fail to estimate the crowd, and they cannot, and there is a lack of transparency regarding the volume of the crowd between the police department and the event organizers that was responsible for the stampede. We have discussed about it. Now how to address it? It can be addressed through the crowd entry system. We can address it through the controlled entry system, like issuing the passes, time slots, face admission, so that the event organizers can estimate the volume of the crowd by calculating the tickets they have sold out, and they can pass over the information. The proper information can be passed from the event organizers to police department, and police department can arrange the n number of police officials to handle such a crowd. And the proper crowd management should be taken place. The proper crowd management includes, first thing, there should be the deployment of an trained marshals, capacity building in the NDRF and the police department for the proper monitoring of the crowd and handling of the crowd. And we can use of the technologies like drones, CCTV, heat sensors. So these are the few steps that should be taken to prevent the crowd. And we also discussed that there is a lack of coordination among the officials is responsible for the stampede. How to address it? It can be addressed through the proper establishing a proper communication system, so that we can address one side, we can address the rumors and misinformation that is prevailing among the crowd and also among the officials, and we can establish a proper coordination system among the officials. And few other steps includes like queue management, avoiding the line cutting, and preventing the time wait, preventing the delays. And we can also use we can also create a one flow system, avoiding the multiple flow of entry and exit points. These are the few steps that should be deployed to prevent the stampede. And other steps includes the scientific temper should be taught from the schools, civic sense, public culture has to be developed from the schools. What are the ethical issues involved in the stampede? The ethical issues involved here, the ethical concerns in the stampede is, aftermath of this disaster like a stampede, there will be the blame game, shifting from the opposition party towards the ruling party towards this police department, and police department towards the event organizers. They start blaming one among the others. So instead of this, the accountability should be fixed, and if there is accountability should be fixed, proper compensation has to be paid to the victims, and proper investigation or inquiry should be done, and the investigation report should be disclosed to the public. So these are the some few ethical concerns involved in the stampede. Now, what are the precautions should be taken in the stampede? Avoid carrying the childrens, because they are more vulnerable, and you can avoid bending in such a crowd. Never bend in that crowd. By mistake, if you collapse in the crowd also, never try to sleep in a straight position. Sleep in a sleep in a lateral position and cover your vital organs, upper abdomen, lower abdomen, and especially the throat. Sleep in a vertical, sleep in a lateral position and cover your vital organs. So these are the precautions that should be taken in the taken during that incidents. So this is about the stampede.